Trump passed his executive order to lower costs of pharmaceutical drugs. People were not happy about this. I don't know why, because we pay a lot for drugs compared to the rest of the world. And their excuse is, oh, because we make more money than they do. But I don't think that's a good excuse, because the people that rely on these drugs are, for the most part, like what, elderly people that are relying on Social Security, and Social Security, is not, they're not giving them thousands of dollars a month. You're on a fixed budget when you have Social Security. So I think this is a good thing. What I don't understand is why there's only one Democrat who is actually saying, let's put this into law like right now. And that's Senator, he's an Indian dude. He represents Silicon Valley in Ro Khanna. So Ro Khanna is a senator in Silicon Valley in California, and he's the only one who said we need to pass this into law, because executive orders are not laws. They can be undone. I mean, Biden did it, so.
Do you mind if I ask, though? Because this is good for people that pay for drugs out of pocket. But what about a lot of people have insurance or pay for insurance? And there's a whole system that's interconnected revolving this, where everybody makes money and everybody gets a cut. And there's one of the arms involved in this is government funding for this. You make pharmaceutical companies pharmaceutical drugs cheaper, you hurt the pharmaceutical companies. But does the consumer ever actually feel their pocket getting fatter? That's my question, just revolving around that.
But why would okay. So if I need a drug, right, and the drug is costing me $100, but I could actually get it for actually half the price, and I'm just being scammed for $100 because they want to make money out of me, because the insurance has to get paid and Big Pharma has to get paid. In this case scenario, I rather Big Pharma eat the money that I have to pay out of pocket, or that my insurance has to pay, because Big Pharma's big business. Big Pharma's been alive forever, like since opium became a thing and was transported into America from China. So like they've been,
For sure.
Their profits are fucking ridiculous.
For sure, that people that are paying for drugs out of pocket, it helps a lot.
But they're saying that for insurance, it will lower the insurance prices, because insurance has to pay a lot of money because of how expensive drugs are.
I am for anything that shrinks Big Pharma, because it's a huge,
amen to that.
Yeah, amen. Because it's a huge industry that has a huge influence on medicine, more than medicine, on health, and gives the perception that if you take this drug, it will relieve your symptoms, when I'm more about tackling the symptoms directly.
Exactly.
If you're obese, let's get to work, the right way. Let's change your diet, do exercise. Let's see how much calories you're losing. Your intake cannot be more than what you're exerting.
Exactly.
All these things. It's the source to, let's say, when you're obese, you get diabetes. But instead, Big Pharma promotes these drugs where if you're obese, you take this, you take that, you inject yourself to...
Yeah, it's a Band-Aid.
And it's just a Band-Aid. But my question is, though, regarding this, and this is a very good question, this is actually where I need to get more educated on. For sure, I agree with you if the person's paying out of pocket, but I've never seen insurance get cheaper. And I'm in my
it's because of Big Pharma.
I'm in my early 30s, and my car insurance has only ever gotten more expensive. That's just one example.
We are in Florida, where car insurance is very expensive.
My insurance for where I work has only gotten more expensive. So pharmaceutical companies can get cheaper, but maybe it's just a chance for insurance to rake in more, to get a bigger, like, now their margin to increase, because when someone needs a drug, the insurance is paying, but it's still going to be the same amount that someone's paying for insurance on a monthly basis.
But wouldn't it be a win for insurance companies and the consumers if a drug gets lowered? Insurance doesn't have to pay out as much, so they're making money. That's a win for them, and it's a win for you, because you don't have to pay that much money out of pocket either. Because even with insurance, you still have to pay a copay.
True. I
So,
don't think
like,
the copay will end. That's why I would need more info because copays never really go away.
right,
But
but they can get lowered, which is a good thing.
yeah,
Or completely remove it. That would be good too. But what got me a really like is that Bernie Sanders. Okay, so backtrack. I didn't vote for Trump the first time around. I didn't vote for Trump the second time around. I didn't vote, period. Not that I didn't vote for him, I just didn't vote. The third time is when I finally voted. And I remember when he ran the first time, Bernie Sanders was running against Hillary Clinton. He was running as an independent, but he's still running as a Democrat nominee. And everybody was following him because of his whole universal health care and the billionaires and the multimillionaires, even though he's a millionaire himself. But he hasn't said anything about this. He's been fighting to make this happen for like ever now. The guy's been in politics since he was like in his 30s. He's 80 something years old and he's completely silent. He's silent. AOC is silent. Every Democrat who claims they're for the working class and for lowering your drug prices haven't said shit except for this guy, Ro Khanna, who's new really in the game. He's not really that.
no politician is purely just operating on altruistic basis. I mean, Bernie Sanders, I think I read somewhere he owns 3 houses. He's worth, I don't know how. You have Nancy Pelosi, you have all. Nobody's just in there for altruistic purposes. They're in there because while they're there, there's some sort of benefit to their self-interest involved.
Yeah, there's a huge kickback.
And some manage it better than others. Some are more low-key about it than others. But there's a huge benefit of self-interest involved. And so them staying silent lowers their... all of a sudden, if they speak for it, they're hurting their party. And their allegiance has become to their party. It's not...
Exactly.
Because they have an interest of self-preservation. They still have to be useful to their party.
Not just their party, the pharmaceutical drug companies who are paying them,
donating
to them.
Who are paying them. And so to be useful to their party or to their interest groups, these self-interest groups, they have to walk the line. And so even if they're in line with something, they say that they're in line, but they're getting money from the pharmaceutical companies, then they're just all talk. And this is the first time that something like this, has come about.
I think this is also kind of like a spit in the face. Like, all right, I'm gonna do what Democrats have been saying they're gonna do, and they're never gonna do. So I'm gonna do it, and let's see if they're gonna actually be for it. If they're not for, then it's because they were lying to you this whole time.
Yeah,
that's literally what I said. I'm like, bro, this is just a power play, because I don't think he gives a shit about this, But RFK does, because RFK is the one who probably told him, hey, I need you to do this because I'm the one for this.
I think Trump this time around came more prepared and he surrounded himself with people that he trusted. I think the first time around he learned a lot.
Yeah.
And he's not playing the same game that the politicians are playing. He plays it a little bit different, but he's a lot more prepared this time. And he's doing things very methodical, like this executive order.
Yeah.
And part of it is, I was telling a close friend of mine, actually just 2 days ago, that he's come in and he's coming after everybody that did him some sort of injustice the first time around. And part of that was the medical industry, the pharmaceutical companies, with COVID coming out and the way it did, the way it was presented. No matter how you view COVID, there's a lot of hypocrisy involved, a lot of lies that were told, a lot of deceit, a lot when you look at the data with the COVID rates jumping high, but the flu disappeared, a bunch of other different types of deaths dropped. There's a lot of questions that left. To say that there's no questions, it was just absolute, I think it's an injustice to science itself, because science is about raising questions.
Yep.
And this time around, he's coming after everybody and he was well prepared that were causing him trouble. And part of that is the pharmaceutical industry. They've made drugs for people that really need it impossible, but also have made people addicted to drugs. But and even one more, the idea of the Band-Aid that you're talking about. Don't worry about fixing your problem. Here's a drug. Here's a Band-Aid for it. But don't ever lose weight. Don't ever stop being obese. You could just take this drug. It's a chronic disease what you have. Don't worry.
Exactly.
and which is it's all BS.
yeah.
Anybody can learn to control their compulsion.
Exactly. I mean, well, let's look into this really quick. This is RFK talking about this, and then I want to talk more into the whole drug epidemic.
Say a few words, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is an extraordinary day. This is an issue that, I grew up in the Democratic Party, and every major Democratic leader for 20 years has been making this promise to the American people. This was the fulcrum of Bernie Sanders' runs for presidency, that he was going to eliminate this discrepancy between Europe and the United States. But as it turns out, none of them were doing it. It's one of these promises that politicians make to their constituents, knowing that they'll never have to do it. And the reason they'll never have to do it is because they know that Congress is controlled in so many ways by the pharmaceutical industry. There's at least one pharmaceutical lobbyist for every congressman, every senator on Capitol Hill, and every member of the Supreme Court. By some estimates, 3. Pharmaceutical companies, the industry itself, spends 3 times what the next largest lobbyist spends on lobbying. So this was an issue that people talked about, but nobody wanted to do anything because it was radioactive. They knew you couldn't get it by Congress. We now have a president who is a man of his word, who has the courage. President Trump was taking money from the pharmaceutical industry too. I think they gave you $100 million. But he can't be bought, unlike most of the politicians in this country. And he is standing here for the American people. I don't know what, there's writers like Lord Elizabeth Warren or Robert Reich who are saying that President Trump is on the side of the oligarchs. There has never been a president more willing to stand up to the oligarchs than President Donald Trump. And I'm very, very proud of you, Mr. President, for your courage, I'll say, because I don't want to be crude, your intestinal fortitude, your stiff spine, and your willingness to stand up for the American people. We have 4.2% of the world's population. Our country represents 75% of the revenues for pharmaceutical companies.
That's crazy.
We spend in our country $1,126 per capita on drugs. In Britain, they spend about $240. They spend 1/5 of what we do. And this is true across Europe. And the drug companies, Europeans, if you ask them, it made no sense what they're saying. America has to pay for this innovation or it's not going to happen. President Trump is saying to our European partners is you got to raise the amount that you're paying for those drugs and pay for your share of the innovation. That the United States is no longer subsidizing that. If the Europeans raise the price of their drugs by just 20%, that is $10 trillion. That can be spent on innovation, and the health of all people all across the globe is going to increase.
Right,
because we're going to have.
So, pretty much what he wants with NATO is what he wants for this too. But same thing with NATO. Why are we paying for your military? You have a military. You spend money on your military. Why am I subsidizing you? Same thing with Canada. Why am I subsidizing you? Pay for your own military. It's the same shit. It's like we're paying for their medical bills instead of, you know what I'm saying? Like we should be paying for our medical bills. You pay for your medical bills. And then if we do that, then we'll be able to actually invest in probably better technology. I don't know, find the cure for cancer,
4% of the world's population, and yet 75% of the big pharma's revenue comes from the U.S. Now, we are a very consumer and unhealthy population among the U.S. And the obesity, I think, is number 1 in the world. But 75% of their revenue, I wonder do we really take that much drugs? From the way does he make sounds of speech, it doesn't seem so. It seems like, we might take more drugs than any other drug, any other part of the world. especially since obesity is so high, because obesity is
the root of a
is
lot
a
of other
product, but it also comes with a lot of other stuff.
Right.
But damn, 75%. And it makes it seem like Europe is, they say, oh, US has to pay for this innovation. If not, there's not going to be any innovation. No. No. And these are like the smaller things where I'm very glad. You know, government itself causes I always keep saying this, government itself causes these problems. It's government itself who causes these problems by making these deals in the back or by making these things. But finally, something that gives at least the people here a little leeway.
It makes you question, like, what are we paying politicians for if you're not fighting for us? So all this time, you've been fighting for Big Pharma.
Well, being a politician is nothing more than, at least in today's age, 2025, the illusion of public good, the illusion that I'm fighting for something and I'm your voice, I'm empowered, I'm going to speak your voice, until it comes time to do actions. And if it's against the special interest that funded them or is donating to them, they're not going to do it.
So you think we should remove, like, PACs?
PACs?
Yeah, like those the like CPACs or
Oh.
like, you know, like the like Turning Point USA, for example. They're a nonprofit organization. They created a PAC and then they fund two different politicians.
You know,
It's whoever makes the most money. Whoever raises the most money is essentially who wins.
I think that as time goes on, you know, the internet is actually fairly new compared to our human history. We're humans, as far as the anatomy of a human, of you and I and Laz, has been around for 100,000 years. The internet has been around for what? Since the early 1990s?
Yeah.
And then adoption has picked up. As time goes on, there's an expectation that the internet, and this is something that a lot of intellectuals made early on in the internet, that information would be so free-flowing that people would take an interest and be more informed about things. But what has happened, I think the internet has given way for more compulsiveness, shorter time frame, the
Yes.
inability to think deeply into things, and it's been used a lot for consumer entertainment rather than knowledge. I think that recently, for whatever reason, I'm seeing people actually use it a little bit more. I mean, I feel like there's a very big line that separates. It's still 50-50, but for the people are still using it for entertainment, but a lot of people have a lot more freedom of access to information. They want to better their lives and they look into things like this. And that's why, I hate to say it to some people, you know, I don't want my brand to get messed up, but I think that's why Trump won. Because there were some people that said, listen, something needs to change. And they don't know what the change is, but they vote for Trump. Because Trump is a little bit different than the same thing over and over. The gaslighting, like we talked earlier.
He's the content president.
Whether it's immigration or whether we want peace, but you better do it our way. We want more war unless you say, well, you know, all these things, it kind of changed with him. And they don't, you know, I don't agree with the tariffs. I don't agree with this. But then there comes things like this where it's a little bit more common sense. Like, come on, 4% of the population, but 75% of the revenue from the U.S., that's a lot. And people can't afford drugs unless you have insurance, and insurance itself is so off the wall expensive here.
It's not. I mean, but like, for example, like my sister just had a baby 2 years ago. She had insurance. She still had to pay $20,000. So it's like,
For having a baby?
yeah. So you know,
Laz, be ready.
yeah, man. When she
Okay.
told me that, I was like, damn, fam. I was like, yikes. And that's with insurance, you know? So like, but at the same time, we go back to the social net. That's because she's a producer. If you're not a producer and you're getting Medicaid, because if you're on Medicaid, you're either not working or you're making like barely nothing to survive. You have a kid under Medicaid, you're completely covered. You don't got to pay a dime.
That's the problem.
And that's the problem.
Producers get punished in this type of
Back in the days, producers were the ones with all the families because they had the money to maintain them. Now it's the opposite. Now producers are questioning, can I really have more than one kid?
because
you know?
because back then, if you were poor and you had a kid, you were gonna make them suffer. There was no welfare to save you. But in today, there's welfare to save you at the expense of the producer.
Exactly.
And so that producer could have had more kids.
Exactly.
And there's nothing fair about it.
No, there isn't, because
There's nothing fair about it. There's empathy involved. You can understand and say, oh wow, that person needs help or whatnot. The person that doesn't have a lot but it's not fair because you're taking from somebody that maybe could have had more kids and taking from him unwillingly. It's not like that person has an option to opt out. If one of us here or a producer decides to opt out of paying taxes for what they've produced, then they go to prison.
Exactly.
They go to jail. That's why government is the only entity that uses coercion to continue to exist as an entity. It's the only one. Even the mafia makes money off, it may be illicit activity like selling drugs or whatnot, but they're still producing. And the reason that they're making money is because there's a demand.
Yep.
For what, I'm not even talking about drugs. It could be
Just
anything
in
under the
general,
table.
whatever the supply is. Yeah.
And government's the only one that's not. And so taking from the producer and giving to the other one, back then you couldn't do that. Now you can. There's a welfare state. You're rewarded for being incompetent.
Exactly.
Or you're rewarded for being irresponsible
Exactly. Yes.
at the expense of the responsible person who's the producer.